Good morning, everyone. Welcome along to this morning's BCP Council Planning meeting. My name is Councillor Kelsey, and my job here today is to chair this meeting. First thing I will do is go over to Joe Tyler, who is clerking the meeting for us, and he will read out the housekeeping rules. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that this meeting of the Planning Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chairman in case of disruption. Please could everyone present follow these ground rules. Only speak when invited to by the Chair. Please use the microphones on your desk when speaking, and do remember to turn them off when you are finished. If accessing the meeting via Microsoft Teams, please turn on your video function when invited to speak. Again, if you are accessing via Teams and would like to speak on an item, please do so by using the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the Teams window. When voting on a move, the Chairman will call out each committee member's name in a roll call style and will ask the member to respond with a vote for, against, or abstain. For those in the room, if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the ground floor of the multi-storey car park. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and that mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. I will now ask each person that's participating in this meeting today to introduce themselves, starting with myself, as I say. I'm Councillor Dave Kelsey, I'm the Chairman. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Toby Johnson, Vice Chair, Planning Committee and Ward Member for Alderney and Bourne Valley.
Councillor Barron.
Morning, Chairman. Councillor Steve Barron, Ward Councillor for Parkstone.
Councillor Steve Bartlett.
Morning, Chair. Steve Bartlett, Ward Member for Redhill and Northbourne.
Councillor Simon Bull.
Morning, Chair. Councillor Simon Bull, Winton East Ward.
Councillor Malcolm Davies.
Morning, Chair. Councillor Malcolm Davies, East Southbourne and Templeton.
Councillor Brian Dion.
Brian Dion, Penny.
Councillor Peter Hall.
Councillor Peter Hall, Christchurch Town Centre Councillor.
Councillor Paul Hilliard.
Paul Hilliard, Councillor for Muddyford, Stampit and West Highcliffe.
We have Councillor Bob Lawson.
Councillor Bob Lawson, Councillor West Southbourne.
Councillor Marion Lepedevin.
Marion Lepedevin, Councillor for Newtown and Heatherlands Ward in the Old Borough of Poole.
Councillor Simon McCormick.
Councillor Simon McCormack, Burton and Grange Ward.
Councillor Tony O'Neill.
Councillor Tony O'Neill, Penhill Ward.
And Councillor Tony Trent.
Councillor Tony Trent, Councillor for Alderney and Bourne.
Thank you. And I'll move on to officers. Artemis Christophe.
Thank you, Chair. Artemis Christophe, Development Management Manager for BCP.
Mr. Hodges.
Good morning, Chairman. David Hodges, Team Leader, Development Management.
And we also have a selection of other officers that will be presenting their cases and will introduce themselves as they come along online. And we also have Robert Firth.
Good morning, Chairman. Robert Firth, Senior Solicitor, as you said.
Thank you very much. And we have Joe Tyler from Democratic Services, and we also have other Democratic officers working in the background to keep this meeting flowing. I'll now move on to the agenda for this meeting, and the first item is apologies, please, Joe.
Thank you, Chairman. So for today's meeting, we have received apologies from Councillor George Farquhar and Councillor Anne Scribley, and subsequently with item 2 substitute members, we have with us today Councillor Bob Lawton substituting for Councillor Scribley. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Members, are there any declarations of interest for any of the items on today's agenda, please? Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chairman. On items 9 and 10, the Avon Beach huts, I'll be stepping out because of my previous comments about overdevelopment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hilliard. That's noted. Members, are you content for me to sign minutes for this meeting today? Thank you. And moving on, public issues. We will have officers' presentation on each of the meetings, after which the protocol will be that Joe will read out any statements or members will speak, and other people doing statements will speak for, against, etc. So with that, we'll go straight into the schedule of planning applications for today. There are 4 applications, and the first one being Broadstone Middle School at Dunyeats Road in Broadstone. And I would ask if Lloyd Fursman, who is covering this also on our trees, could be on standby for this. But could the Planning Officer, Chloe Oliver, please introduce your report? Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much. This is Broadstone Middle School. Oh, I'll just share my screen for you. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Chloe.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so the application at Broadstone Middle School for the erection of a perimeter fence around the site and associated gates. So the application site's in the north of Poole, situated on Dunyeats Road, which is a main road which links Gravel Hill into the centre of Broadstone. So up here. So yeah, the school is situated to the north of Dunyeats Road. And then just to give you an overview on aerial, the site is surrounded by residential properties to the east, west and south. The school buildings themselves are located in the south of the site, with the car park to the west. We've then got playing fields and the tennis courts up to the north of the buildings. Around the site, we've got various different specially protected areas. So we've got these triple SI to the north. We've also got protected trees, which are to the north and to the west of the site. We've also got a conservation area down here to the sort of southwest. I can show next screen. So yeah, conservation area down on this one. The area is sort of more widely covered by a TPO, which is shown in green there. But as I say, the site only it's affected sort of along the west and north boundary there. Also cutting across the site in grey that you can see there is the green belt. So that covers, also crosses across the tennis courts and the playing fields to the north of the site. So just to give you a bit of context of the site as existing, so we've got various different existing boundary treatments, so along to the front, the vehicular access, some of the pedestrian entrances as well. We've got some metal gates, and also just to note, there are some trees being removed as part of the scheme. They aren't protected, but just to highlight them here as they appear in this photo, those ones there. We've also got, as I say, a variety of different boundary treatments. Top left, just an area where the pupils stand to the front of the site in the morning, but we've also got chain link fence along the frontage to Dunyeats Road as well, which this continues mostly around the rest of the site in the playing fields to the rear. So bottom left and bottom right, you might just about be able to see there's a fence line sort of along the edge of the heather there. Okay, so just to give you an overview of the proposal, the fence line is shown, the new fence is shown in green on this overview plan. Some of the fence will be along the site boundary and some of it will be internal to the site, partly to avoid trees, but also just as a sort of more natural sort of boundary to the playing fields at the back here. As I say, sort of varying gates sort of at various different points around the perimeter of the site as well. The fence itself will be 2.4 metres high, with panels being 2.5 metres wide. Your sort of atypical fencing that is seen at in schools nowadays. We've also got just an example picture there of the type of fencing. All the matters are laid out within the case officer's report, but one of the issues that's been sort of one of the issues to tackle with the most is the site intersection through the green belt. So the fencing itself is classed as inappropriate development, but in this case, it's seen that there are very special circumstances, as there's other areas of the MPPF which rely on safety and security of school children and just the general public that override the status of inappropriate development to enable the development to be acceptable. As I say, all the other constraints, any other sort of issues with the constraints are considered acceptable. They're laid out in the report, and the recommendation is to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chloe. Mr. Tyler.
Thank you, Chair. So for this item, we do not have any public statements. Thank you.
Okay, in that case, members, I'll just remind you that the only reason this application is in front of us today is because this is on council-owned land. The sole reason for this fencing is for the security of the children in that area. We have had this before, but we will still debate it if anyone has any questions for it. I'm not going to just push something through because it is a council-owned land. Councillor Bull.
Thank you, Chair. It seems a fairly straightforward application. My one question would be, with the fencing, is there appropriate access for wildlife along the fencing? You know, if badgers or hedgehogs, can they get through the fencing at any point?
I know it's going to be chain link fencing from what I gather, but we'll ask Chloe that question for you, Councillor. Chloe, could you answer that, please?
Yes, there's an existing fence in place. If I just, so I'll just show you some pictures. To say, obviously, we've got existing fences around the perimeter already. It would be difficult to sort of argue that now that's required, but what we have got is there are ecology improvements within a submitted report by the applicant. So we've got bird boxes, bat boxes, which are sort of, we're trying to improve the biodiversity on the site, but because we've sort of gone with that, because there's an existing fence that already prevents wildlife in some aspects getting into the site. So yeah, not in this case, no, the fence itself, it does not sort of allow that, but as I say, that's because of the situation of the existing fence.
Okay. Thank you, Chloe. Councillor Bull. Okay.
Yeah, I think the existing fence is not quite as fully contained as this new one will be. I think it's a shame that there's not some form of mitigation to that.
Thank you. Any further comments from members? If not, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation on that. If I could get a seconder, please. Councillor O'Neill? Yep. Thank you very much. In that case, members, I'll go through the roll call as normal. Myself, Councillor Kelsey, I am for. Councillor Johnson? For. Councillor Barron?
For.
Councillor Bartlett?
For.
Councillor Bull?
For.
Councillor Dion? Councillor Davies?
For.
Councillor Hall?
For.
Councillor Hilliard? For. Councillor Lepedevin?
For.
Councillor McCormick?
For.
Councillor O'Neill? For. Councillor Trent?
For.
And Councillor Lawton?
For.
So that, ladies and gentlemen, by my calculations is unanimous. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Chloe, for the report. That application is passed as per the officer's recommendation. So, members, moving on, we will turn to the next item on the agenda, which is item 8, former coal yard, Ashley Road in Boscombe. And I would ask if Frank Genley would present his report, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just about to start my screen sharing.
Chloe, I think you still have yours up on screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My first time at committee, I'd just like to say hello. This is an application for a site members will be familiar with from previous applications that have been in, and also historically concerns about antisocial behaviour, dumping and quasi-unofficial car washing taking place. The site sits adjacent to the London to Bournemouth railway line. There are houses opposite on North Road to the south, and Ashley Road is a main road with flats and houses on the western side. The site currently is in a state of abandonment with concrete structures and bays from previous uses still extending. There are trees on the site, there's concrete, there's various dumped materials. There's a car wash operating. You'll see most of the trees are around the boundaries. There are some in the central areas. Access is currently taken from the main junction you just see up here to the, sorry, I'll just skip forward, from the corner point of North Road and Ashley Road, this junction here. There is a commercial use opposite. There are trees as the road rises to the bridge over the railway line. And if I go back here, you'll see the houses on North Road are semi-detached and terraced houses of Victorian era. Opposite in front of those houses are the trees and the boundary, which sits within the domain of the application site. This is the site as it currently exists. We have trees marked on here. The car wash takes place up in this area here to the north. The existing use, sorry, my screen's frozen. The railway station site used to sit to the north here with platforms. So proposed is a commercial building with a use comprising a builder's merchant with plumbing, timber and other supplies. It's a two-storey building that will sit on the southern boundary, set in from the existing tree line. The grey areas you can see that are hatched will be outdoor storage racking to a certain height, which I can talk about in a moment. The entrance will be moved from the corner of the junction here northwards to avoid conflict with the bus stops, and a new junction will be provided that's in and out with a pedestrian footpath connecting there into a demarcated surface. Once in the site, there's a one-way system going around, and deliveries and collections for HGVs will take place to the right-hand side, the eastern side of the site, in a service yard that will be gated, so there'll be no customer access to that. A caged area for tool hire sits just to the southwest of the building, where large plant will be able to be hired, such as compactors for your ground gravel and things like that at home. The site is open to the public as well as building trade. Customer parking is proposed here, the white spaces next to the bays, and staff parking is proposed here above the attenuation tank for the suds next to the building. Let's go back a second. Certain areas of trees are being retained. There's a copse of trees here to this end and trees along this boundary to the south also being retained. There's additional planting taking place along the Ashley Road boundary. You'll see an orange line here. That is a retained area for future pedestrian access to the footpath to the railway station, should it ever be redeveloped or opened up again, and an easement along the railway line for access to ease access to a future platform, should that happen. The building itself will be what you all know, a conventional style industrial shed. It's green with yellow and straw finish. Doors are yellow. The ends of the building will be yellow, the corner parts, with some squares on. What you're seeing here is the elevation facing the North Road houses. Elsewhere, it'd still be green, but there were shutters on the northern side, so access and deliveries and customer access takes place from the northern side into the car park. There's a view looking from the bridge back down into the site of roughly what you can expect the building to look like, with an approximation of stacking to about 5.5 metres in height. And moving on, just to give you a brief introduction, this is the camber of the road, the houses on North Road opposite. This is what we currently have. The bottom one is the existing situation with a line of trees. The proposal once built, the ground sits slightly lower, so the measurements are taken from the ground height within the site. And as you can see, the offset distance, the trees and the height of the building here. Fencing, I know members might be interested in fencing. They're proposing mesh fencing around the site, and if we want to come back to this for any questions, there is a plan showing exactly what's going where, what's being kept, and what is going to be added to. There's a variety of mesh fencing going in of various heights around the site. There's some tracking drawings because I know members were concerned about vehicle tracking, and I can talk a bit in a moment about conditions if we need to, specifically to address HGVs. But I've got some sketches here if they come up as a request. And that's the conclusion of my presentation. There's a couple of things I just want to add. There's an addendum report that brings out some tweaks to the conditions that have taken place since the report was finalised, which members will have seen circulated yesterday. And also just some comments on the trees issue. I just wanted to clarify, I don't think the report goes into enough information on this. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things for members, that 55 trees which are TPO'd are to be lost within the site. The report needs to be clearer. Paragraph 33 says that the loss will be mitigated by the proposed landscaping and red-trained trees. It should say only partially mitigated. I came to this application in January, take over from the previous officer, and there was a lot of history to go through. And I think the TPO, the tree officers, came from a starting point about a year and a half ago of objecting to the loss of all the trees. And the comments now are that they support the proposed landscaping and the retention of the existing trees. The context is that 24 new trees are to be planted. So we are losing, of those 55, we're losing 55. 24 new trees are being planted, 14 on Ashley Road and 10 on North Road. Obviously, in addition to the ones that are being kept on North Road. So there is still a 31 tree shortfall. This is a concern on ecology and biodiversity grounds, but it's also set against, as the report says, the need for an economic and social use for the site to find a redevelopment purpose. It is an allocated site for development in both the core strategy and the neighbourhood plan. Retaining the trees has been a difficult consideration. The tree officer acknowledges that HGV movements, forklifts, stacking the racks will cause problems for the trees in lifetime, and regrettably the trees have been accepted for their loss. But I've just been speaking with the tree officer this morning and felt it was appropriate just to focus that wording and say it's only partially mitigated. Coming to the planning balance, the planning balance is one, as I've just mentioned, trying to find a future use for this site that contributes to local economy and social needs, as well as trying to address the environmental needs of the borough. It would deliver an acceptable sui generis use on the site, which is employment based, contribute to the local economy with phased construction jobs and permanent employment for staff at the site. It would make financial contributions to the local economy, paying rates and provision of services that support the local building trade, including members of the public. We feel that sufficient mitigations have been incorporated into the design and the layout, and that conditions proposed manage to neutralise any latent potential for amenity or highway impacts. And again, environmentally, we do have the trees that are coming in, 24 additional trees that offer some mitigation. Subject to all those conditions, the recommendation is to grant permission. There are a couple of key conditions to deal with construction hours and traffic to address the issue of the nearby schools that involve articulated vehicles having 3 axles to be accompanied by a banks person to make the vehicle turn in safely. If they are arriving between 8:30 and 9 and 3 and 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon during school times. And the conditions include contact details for St Clement's Infant School and Kings Park Academy on station approach to the north of the site, so that they're kept informed of any movements during construction particularly, but also in the long term of the application's lifetime. Other than that, there are conditions to secure the future access phase to the railway line, and the general conditions have been modified to address a restriction on stacking and racking of products above 5.5 metres, and to look at arrangements for hours of use, overnight lighting and landscaping. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Frank. Mr. Tyler.
Thank you, Chairman. So to confirm, in terms of the public statements for this item, we have received no statements in objection, and I understand that we have Mr. Tim Rainbird, who is the agent acting on behalf of the applicant, on the Microsoft Teams call. So if you're wanting to invite him in to speak.
Yes, please. Mr. Rainbird, if you're available, please.
Good morning, Chair. Can you hear me?
We can indeed, thank you.
Excellent. Good morning, Chair and members of the Planning Committee. I'm Tim Rainbird, Board Director of Planning Consultancy Quad, and the agent representing my client, Travis Perkins, who are the owners of the former coal yard site on Ashley Road, Bournemouth. My client welcomes your officer's recommendation to approve this full planning application for a new builder's merchant. The applicant would like to start by giving particular thanks to the case officer, Frank Genley, who took over the management of the application early in the new year and has diligently and efficiently drawn it to a conclusion. If approved, the proposed builders merchant will be occupied by Travis Perkins, who are one of the largest timber and builders merchants in the UK. As you'll be aware, Travis Perkins currently has 2 existing branches in Bournemouth, Wyndham Road and Jameson's Road. The site at Ashley Road has been acquired to facilitate a relocation of the branch at Wyndham Road. That branch, which is heavily constrained and poses major operational issues. The development of the site at Ashley Road will ultimately lead to the closure of the Wyndham Road branch, making that site available for redevelopment. As you've heard from your officer, the scheme provides a purpose-built builder's merchant, including builder's yard. What is important to highlight is that the design of the development has been heavily informed through collaborative and proactive engagement with your officers over a period of nearly 18 months. Following an initial pre-application meeting in July 2020, the layout was in fact completely redesigned. The design has further evolved through the submission of the application in December 2020, and working closely with your technical officers, the layout to ensure all of your planning policies are now met. Perhaps most importantly, the siting of the building, backing onto and running parallel with North Road, provides both a visual screen to the builder's yard, with the building itself also acting as an acoustic barrier. The amenity of residents has therefore been protected. The scheme is also supported by comprehensive landscaping and includes new semi-mature planting along Ashley Road, as you have heard, and reinforced planting along North Road. The proposals also respect plans to improve Ashley Road through both land dedication and through contributing tens of thousands of pounds to fund planned improvement works. Land is also to be dedicated to secure future level access to the disused Boscombe railway station platform should that aspiration to reopen the station be fulfilled. Working closely with your officers, the scheme comes before you as a planning policy compliant, sustainable economic development. Significantly, there are no objections from statutory consultees, including highways, environmental health, planning policy and landscape officers, as you have heard. There are also no objections from residents. Turning to the scheme's benefits, the scheme and site has been dormant for nearly 25 years despite its local plan allocation for employment development. These proposals will therefore unlock the long-awaited redevelopment of this previously developed land, and in doing so will deliver the following economic benefits: protection and creation of 25 full-time local jobs. Further jobs will be created through the construction stage. New business rates will be generated. Private sector investment of more than £9 million, and in turn it will boost investor confidence in the Bournemouth and Boscombe area. To sum up, the approval of this full planning application will facilitate the redevelopment of a parcel of land which is allocated for employment use and has stood vacant for almost 25 years. We have worked closely with your officers for nearly 2 years to secure the optimum proposals for the site, which are now fully supported by statutory consultees with no objections from residents. As a consequence, the application has a strong recommendation from your officers who are putting forward for approval, and I hope that you're able to support your officers' recommendation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Rainbird. So, members, it's over to you. Councillor Lawton, you've indicated you'd like to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I totally welcome this development of the old coal yard in Bournemouth. When it was the old Bournemouth Council and I had responsibility for housing for Bournemouth Council, the coal yard was a complete eyesore for a number of years because we tried to build houses on there, we tried to get other agencies to build on that site, and we failed. So I totally welcome this investment in jobs and monetary value into that site to redevelop that site and make it into a commercial area. It also helps BCP and the old Bournemouth Council's policy of regeneration for the Boscombe area. So I totally welcome this development. I think it's a super development by a major PLC, a major blue chip company, which we welcome. So I totally support this and I recommend and move that we accept the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lawton. I'll note that and wait for other people to speak. We must seek a seconder as well. Councillor Bull.
Thank you, Chair. I do welcome this replacement builder's yard, but I have a couple of concerns. I don't know if the highway officer is able to talk at all to the traffic there, and of course with the new highway rules where pedestrians have priority, as they should, there's going to be cause to a delay in traffic causing tailbacks into Boscombe and the other way, of which we already suffer. So I wonder if one of the highways officer could ask about that.
Absolutely.
And also the change in the dispensation so that they don't have any HGVs has been changed from an hour each end to half an hour. And I'm wondering if 8:30 to 9 is appropriate, and whether 9:15 would be a much better situation, because it's not unusual for parents to be late, running late, or to any school. So I think that should be the consideration. Perhaps that condition could be made 8:30 to 9:15. I think that would make a big difference. And it's also pleasing to see the National Rail aspiration to at some point reopen Boscombe Station, which I was very surprised to see.
Not as surprised as I was. Mr. Edwards, would you like to come back on those comments, please?
Thank you, Chair. Alexis Edwards, Transport Development Management Team Leader. In regard to the condition, obviously that can be changed subject to the planning officer's agreement that it's possible to do so. With the access itself, it is not a priority junction arrangement with drop curbs and the lowered section of carriageway. It is in fact the footway retained at full height and a short transition curb on the front edge nearest the carriageway, so that pedestrians have priority over that junction. And that's something that we insisted on, given the high numbers of children heading to the school to the north of the site. So that should address concerns about people walking down the pavement there. I'm trying to think, but the second question of Councillor Bulls regarding traffic numbers, was that what you were specifically asking?
Yes, please, Mr. Edwards.
Well, the site itself is going to generate a number of HGV movements, deliveries, etc. The actual total number of deliveries is relatively low compared to existing movements along Ashley Road. In the report, it talks about I think a 1.3% total increase on the number of movements down that corridor. So in the scale of things, it's not a huge change. If you give me a minute, I can probably look for the exact number.
Thank you very much. We'll come back to you for that. If you let us know when you have that, Mr. Edwards, that'd be fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
On a separate point, if I may,
yeah.
It was just about the trees. I know we have, it's very sad to see losing 55 trees and replaced with 24, presumably not mature trees, so won't be as beneficial for a good number of years. The condition that these trees can only be felled outside of nesting season, there's a condition there unless the head of planning agrees otherwise. And I'm not sure that I can agree with that. It's nesting season, the tree should be left alone until outside of nesting season, unless he's going to individually notify each bird that they can't, which I assume.
We do have a tree officer with us, if you'd like to put that question to them, please. Is Mr. Clark available, please?
Good morning. Yes, the trees should not be felled during the bird nesting season. So unless full surveys are carried out to ensure there is no nesting birds. This is not really my remit. This is down to a biodiversity officer normally. But my understanding is you should not be felling trees within the bird nesting season.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Clark.
Thank you.
Frank, would you like to come back in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. 2 points. That just the actual point I want to make is not about the birds, but I'll just start on the birds. The condition allows typically, I mean, it's a requirement of the law that birds are protected under the 1984 Wildlife Act. Typically what happens, if it ever needs to happen, is an qualified ecologist has to come on site and inspect each tree or each hedge before works take place to make sure there's no nesting birds in there. And often that can be by way of a variation of that condition to allow those specific things to happen. That condition there is a protection condition. The law exists separately to it in a way. So on the point I wanted to mention was a response to the HGV questions and the movements. I have been negotiating with the applicant for some time to get the conditions nuanced correctly to make sure that they work to protect schools. I think the important point on the HGV movements for the site is that highways are satisfied that the junction works as it currently, I'll just bring the drawing up, works as it's been designed. So there's no need for additional conditions. What we've tried to do with the applicant is to agree a set of conditions that offer additional security for users of the pavements that are perhaps not used to lorries, and that's obviously the younger people. The conditions require that during construction, the developer notify the road safety team, as well as the two schools, of intended plant arriving during school pickup and drop-off times. The hours of the conditions were originally 1 hour at either end of the day. But having looked at their traffic assessment, they've been brought down to something closer to what the schools used to operate before COVID messed up with school schedule and timetables. So to try and offer some security there to people arriving with their children, I take the member's point about 9:15, and it's one of the things I have discussed with the developer. They only have one HGV vehicle movement per hour, typically at Travis Perkins sites. And I know that means that we're looking at specifically this developer, and if another user came along and took over the site, I guess the variation to that condition could be applied for. They could apply to remove that condition. we felt satisfied that that half-hour window worked. I take members' points, and I can certainly discuss that with if the resolution is followed with a caveat to follow up on that condition. I can do that with the applicant. The applicant's here today and may want to offer some commentary on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Frank. Councillor Bull, you okay? Yep, thank you. Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. I'm reasonably happy with the proposal. I think it's a bit unfortunate that the entrance and exit and North Road are quite close together, although it needed to be that part of the site, because otherwise exiting in the site would cause loss of visibility through the hump of the railway bridge. The one thing me about this, and practically every planning application we have, is the loss of trees. Even if they were replanted on one-to-one basis, you would be losing 30 years or so in the carbon absorption ability of the tree. And this is happening over and over again. And we are in an emergency. And although I can't see very many ways around this, but usually car parks to developments like this have trees planted in them, and I just wondered whether there could have been scope to work around at least some of the trees on site, because as I say, I am disturbed at the loss of trees. Sometimes it's only one or two. This one's about 30 trees, and for the overarching thing which we tend to forget about because it's such a big issue. The trees are the one thing which helps mitigate what we're facing in the future. So I'm concerned about that, but I can't really see any reason to object to the planning action other than that, with the only caveat that the pedestrian crossing of the entrance to the site of emergency is made as safe as possible, because it is close to a school, and so we do need to make sure that it's safer than those using the school.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Councillor Barron, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think Councillor Bull's made a very good point there, actually, about the extra 15 minutes, because if parents and children are running late, then that's the time when they're not going to be concentrating properly. So I think for safety, if that could be that extra 15 minutes, I'd really welcome that. And the other question is about the lighting. Presumably you'll be lighting, all night. Will it pollute neighbouring properties? The lighting at night, will it flood over into neighbouring properties? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barron. No, I think from what I can see on the plans, the lighting is going away from there's only properties on the one side of North Road, and the building will have its back to those, so any lighting will be going out across their entrance as opposed to, yeah. Okay, but I'll take your point. We can ask about the 15 minutes added on afterwards. Councillor Pedovin, please.
Mine's just a quick query, actually. I noticed this was subject to a council call-in, but we haven't had a statement. Has something got omitted by error? Because it did happen once before.
No, what has happened is Councillor Farquhar called this in, as did Councillor Jones. Councillor Jones withdrew his call-in. Councillor Farquhar did not. Councillor Farquhar, who was a member of this planning board, decided it was better in his interest not to be here today and go campaigning for his local party. So that is what he's doing. He did submit a statement, but that statement arrived at 3 o'clock this morning. I have chosen as chair to use my discretion and not have that statement read out. We would not allow a member of the public to do that, and I'm not going to allow a councillor, particularly a councillor who is a member of this planning board, to do that. If members want to call items in, they should have the courtesy to either turn up or put their statements in on time. And I'm not going to do something for a councillor that I would not do for a member of the public. That is why we have no statement.
Thank you, but that's not the councillor's name that's on the agenda.
Yes,
it's the other councillor.
Yeah, the other councillor withdrew his call-in.
Well,
he withdrew it. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Hilliard, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second the proposal, but I'm looking at condition 33, the hours of use activity. Now, most of the Travis Perkins sites around this way are opening time 7:30 to 5. So I would propose that those hours are added. I can't see why additional hours are proposed here when the other sites aren't, and also it's to protect the amenity of residents. And similarly, going to the point B about the deliveries of the 3-axle trucks, I think probably 8:15 to 9:15 makes more sense in weekdays. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hilliard. I'll come back to the officer in a moment and we'll get some clarity on all the points. Councillor Barnett.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was going to second the move, but as Councillor Hilliard has done that. What I would say is it's clear that the officer has done an excellent job on this report, very thorough, and all aspects have been looked at very, very closely. I'm very mindful of trying to vote changes at the board meeting when a report has been examined so thoroughly, because very often changes can result in the law of unintended consequences and may not work for whatever reason. Whilst it might seem a good idea at the time, when it actually gets analysed at a later point, you realise that actually it's probably okay as it was. So in view of the thoroughness of the report, I would have seconded the motion without any further changes to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd actually just like to echo Councillor Bartlett's comments there. I think that if we change too much, especially opening times, I feel uneasy doing it at this stage, because it's up to the business to apply for, and I think that the officers done an excellent job. And I feel a little bit uneasy about delving that far into the business's opening times. And certainly I wouldn't like to limit them too much by condition, because at the hours that are said in the report, they're not going to be doing a lot of business anyway. I wouldn't think there aren't many people picking up lumber, late into the evening. So I'd be happy to support the move as was made without those alterations. I can certainly see the extra 15 minutes perhaps having some good, but I don't think it's got enough good for me to not support it without that. So I'll happily support the motion to grant without any alteration. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gently, would you like to come back on that? I'm very mindful of what Councillor Bartlett said, and I do actually find myself totally agreeing with him. Firstly, I want to say thank you to you. I know you were at a very late notice when everything was already going through, and you've done a fantastic job on this report. It's clear, it's concise, it's to the point, covers everything that I can think of. So well done on that, and thank you very much. I personally don't think we need to change the timings on anything. I'm really fortunate that my ward abuts this road. My ward starts on the other side of Ashley Road, so I know this area so well, and I will be so glad to see the back of the site on Wyndham Road, which caused me no end of grief. So obviously that area there is far more pedestrian living there, and we have absolute chaos from the lorries there. So I do understand the fact that they want to move, and I think it's a really good idea. I don't think that we're in the position to change the opening times of that. I think we have to bear in mind, most builders, decorators, they work through the day, but we have to remember that members of the public also use Travis Perkins. So those want to do home improvements and that, who are often at working day hours, will want to go there later in the evening, possibly, to pick up their supplies. And I would hate to think that we're curtailing that. The extra 15 minutes, it has been mentioned, and I do know that we have the applicant on the phone and he has heard the discussions today, and it may be that they come back to you afterwards to change that. I don't think I want to support a move going forward that says we must change that. My support would be going to a move to do it as the officer's report states. So as the move stands, I would not actually support it with those conditions being added, but I would support it if the mover and seconder did not want to add those reports. I've not asked the mover. We have had that put forward by members. So I will go back to the mover now and ask the mover if he is prepared to add those conditions to his move, or if he would not want those conditions added. Councillor Lawton.
No, I propose that we carry on with the original move and accept the officer's recommendations.
And Councillor Hilliard, you obviously are the seconder of that move, so you have equal say as well.
Thank you, Chair. Now, like you said, hopefully the applicant and Travis Perkins will look at their other hours of stores and just refer back to those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I appreciate that. And I was happy, Mr. Frank, could you just confirm that they were going to be replanting semi-mature trees? Did I hear you correctly when you said that?
That's my understanding of what's being discussed. We have got a fairly substantial, robust landscaping condition. So when that does come in, it will give us the ages of the trees. So if we're not satisfied that they're going in at the right age, that those details can be asked to be amended or refused. The problem with trees that are too mature when they get planted is they don't take as well. It's often a problem. So it's that finding that balance. The landscaping condition should address that and allow us the right time to look at that when it comes in. And obviously we will consult with the tree section and landscaping colleagues when that does come in for us to assess. So if you look at the landscaping condition, it is quite tiered and triggered. So there's certain things they have to do and certain information they have to provide, one of which is the planting schedule, including ages, species, locations. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Frank.
Chair, if I may, just on one point,
Yeah,
Chair,
please do.
members made comments about lighting. I'm not sure if it's totally clear in the report, but the lighting is to be turned off overnight. So then there's to be no PIR lighting, so no motion sensor lighting coming on, because that would obviously risk making problems for neighbours. But everything is to be pointed downwards and away from the tree planted areas. But the lighting's not going to be on overnight. It's only coming on to let staff access the building safely. Okay.
That's great. Thank you for that. Councillor Barron, are you happy with that?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, to grant and seconded. So we will go to the vote on that. Myself, I will be for. Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Barron.
For.
Councillor Bartlett.
For.
Councillor Bull.
For.
Councillor Dion.
For.
Councillor Davies.
For.
Councillor Hall.
For.
Councillor Hilliard.
For.
Councillor Pedevin.
For.
Councillor McCormick.
For.
Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Trent.
For.
Councillor Lawton.
For.
Again, that is unanimous. Thank you very much, members. And thank you, Frank, again for your great work on that report. It was really good to see such a detailed report. Thank you. So that application is granted as per the officer's recommendation. So, members, we will now move on to item 9 on the agenda, and that is Avon Beach huts numbers 63 to 99, Mudderford in Christchurch. At this point, Councillor Hilliard is leaving the meeting and will take no part in discussions or voting on this. Thank you, Councillor Hilliard. Mr. Hodges, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just check that you are seeing the PowerPoint, please?
We are. Thank you, Mr. Hodges.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be presenting this today as Emma Witchery has moved on. And Chairman, members may remember this site from the meeting back in September. Just for clarity, there are now 2 separate applications on the agenda today. They're not interlinked, they're separate sites. And we are considering first the application for, which is retrospective for huts 63 to 99. So just a reminder of the site again on the beachfront here, near the Avon Road. So just some aerial views of the site where you can see the site sits in a long stretch of existing beach huts, framing the promenade and the seafront at this point, set down below the roads above, Avon Road above. So as just described, this is a separate application just for this headline here. So it's this run of beach huts that goes east of the steps down opposite Friars Road, and the works have already been carried out in respect of this site. So just providing a little bit more clarity on there. Hopefully you can see this pink line. So this is how the huts have been extended further forward. You can see the measurements here on the depth of the promenade, so between 5.3 metres and 5.7 metres. And just as a comparison point, you can also see from the plan that opposite the kiosks further west, the width of the promenade is at 3.7 metres. Just for clarity on the works that have been carried out to the hut, the heights of the huts are unchanged. The In this application for the retrospective, the huts have been extended approximately 1.8 metres forward, and their total depth is at 4.2 metres. And here we see, just in a little bit more detail, the width of the promenade that's remaining in front of the extended huts. Just to show some photos, here you can see the run of huts which have been brought forward, going off towards the east there. And here you can see again the hut sitting within this character of the beachfront, with a large number of existing huts, starting at 63 here and going along further east, and how they sit comfortably with the remaining huts on the seafront, and just looking down from the promenade itself, seeing the views up here. Chairman, as members discussed this application before, notwithstanding the decision made previously, we do have concerns about the ability to defend the reasons for the reason for refusal given, for the reasons set out in the plan, in the report, I should say. The impact of the huts on the character and appearance of the area, from our point of view, is limited. And it is compatible with the character and appearance of the conservation area, and for the reasons set out, we do not consider in this instance that there is a grounds for objecting on highway safety. For the reasons set out in the report, Chairman, we recommend the application for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Hodges. Mr. Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For this item, we have received requests to speak and statements, both in objection and support, and we do also have the ward councillor, Councillor Leslie Dedman, here to speak. Starting with the statements in objection, we have received one from Mr. Steve Alves of the Friarscliff Residents Association, and the statement is as follows. The result has been to reduce the width of the promenade, which was widened using public money and removing the benefit of this increased amenity for the general public. Local and core policies H12, HG2 require development to be appropriate in character, scale and design. The extended huts are double the size of the previous huts and therefore do not comply. The area is within the Muddyford Conservation Area, and the extended huts are massively out of scope, size and mass from both existing Avon Beach Company huts and BCP traditional beach huts. Local residents and councillors have already seen the effect of this reduced space from hut owners sprawling across the promenade, affecting pedestrians and disability scooters from safely transiting. The tenant and applicant has stated that the terms of the hut owner's lease requires them not to block the promenade, but this is not generally enforced and has led to arguments between hut owners and pedestrians. The huts are visually intrusive along this conservation area, and BCP have already refused this scheme under application 8210346, quoting, "The beach huts, by reason of their extended size and further intrusion onto the promenade, are considered to result in overdevelopment that would harm the visual amenities of the seafront locality. The width of the promenade would be reduced, preventing access for all users of this space, and seating, tables and other beach paraphernalia placed beyond the beach huts would create obstructions for walking, cycling, pushchairs, wheelchairs and scooters. As such, the proposal is considered to be contrary to policies KS11 and HE2 of the Christchurch and East Dorset Local Plan Core Strategy 2014. The applicant has merely resubmitted two applications, one to keep these overdeveloped huts that have been already extended, and another to request further hut extensions further along the promenade. The council's stated position for refusing the previous application should still stand, as there has been no modification to the extended huts, and not only should this application be refused, but enforcement action should result post-refusal, as there has been planning harm caused without possible mitigation, which is a reason for enforcement as quoted by Mr. Hodges of the planning team. Following that statement, we did also receive a request to speak from a Mr. Kelvin Witt, who said that he would attend in person. I understand that he's not here, Mr. Chairman, and I unfortunately don't have a statement to read out on his behalf. So I will move to the statements in support of the application. First, we have a Mr. Giles Moyer. Okay, yeah, then so we have Mr. Peter Hayward of Avon Beach Limited. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Peter Hayward and I'm our Director of Avon Beach Limited. We have managed Avon Beach Promenade and the beach huts for the past 10 years. As part of our planning applications, we have submitted details of the rules all hut users must abide by at Avon Beach. These rules have been in place during our stewardship decades under the Derham family's tenure. The rule most pertinent to this application is that hut users are only allowed to sit in front of their huts to the width of a single table and chair. This is less than 1 metre. Avon Beach Limited has the authority to prohibit the use of beach huts to those that do not abide by these rules. Due to the unique nature of Avon Beach tenancy, the promenade and beach huts are supervised constantly during daylight hours all year round. We are able to ensure that the promenade is kept clear for the public to enjoy. This has been the case for decades. There has never been a report of overcrowding from the council in their capacity as landlord or local authority. In the autumn of 2017, Christchurch Council submitted a planning application to repair and raise the promenade at Avon Beach. This was granted. At no point did the council state that the purpose of the works was to provide a wider promenade. The previous promenade width ranged, on average, between 3.8 and 4.6 metres. In the decades that the old promenade was in place, there was never a case of overcrowding raised. The approved application of 2017 for the new promenade seen today has a width of 3.7 metres in front of the Avon Beach shop. This area is by far the busiest of the whole promenade, as it is the point at which the public toilets, takeaway services and public seating are located. This 3.7 metres was deemed acceptable and wide enough by Christchurch Planning Committee in October 2017 for their own application. 5 metres, which is the width of the promenade we're proposing, should be more than sufficient for a much quieter stretch of Avon Beach promenade as seen in this application. Many beach hut owners on BCP seafronts, many beach huts on BCP seafronts are located on promenades where the width is substantially less than 5 metres. Southbourne and Bournemouth beaches at 4.5 metres and adjacent Friars Cliff with 3 metres promenade. All of these beach huts have been erected without the need for planning by BCP. The new bistro development at Southbourne Beach was approved last month with a promenade width of 4 metres on an actual cycling route. As a local family business, we ask that our application be treated in line with those previously submitted on BCP seafronts. We have invested over £2.3 million to improve the facilities at Avon Beach for the public and to make an attractive destination and an asset the council can be proud of. I urge the committee to follow their officer's recommendation in approving this application before you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Secondly, Mr. Giles Moore of Chumilly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. As you have heard, the applicants are pleased to see that the application has been recommended for approval and that the officer's report contains a full assessment of the comments from the highways officer. There are a number of points contained in the highway officer's comments which are not correct. It's not correct to say path. It's clear from the signage that exists on the promenade that cycling is not permitted and that cyclists must dismount. As described in the officer's report to committee and detailed in the information we have provided to councillors, there are no designated cycle routes which run along the promenade. The highway officer does not evidence his assumption with regard to the frequency of use of the promenade, and it's important to note that the long distance walking route, which is a European walking route, runs along the cliff top behind, not on the promenade. In October 2021, the highways officer supported the planning application to extend the beach huts. From a highways perspective, there's been no change with regard to the impact on the promenade, other than the applicant putting forward a management plan to detail how the promenade will be managed to avoid and prevent potential conflicts. The applicants, the same as any applicant, should expect a consistent approach from the council and its officers when dealing with planning applications. In this instance, there's been no material change in policy, no material change in circumstances, and no change in the proposal to support a divergence with the highway officer's approach. The lack of evidence to support our divergence in approach, is something that the planning officer has clearly identified in their report, and we would request that you give no weight to the highway officer's comments when determining this application. Prior to committee, we have provided councillors with details of a planning application that was approved on the Camphor Cliffs beachfront in January of this year. This allows for the narrowing of the promenade to 3.6 metres. Camphor Cliffs promenade is on the national cycling route, and the application to reduce the width of the promenade was approved. The applications before you at Avon Beach retain a minimum promenade width of 5 metres, which is 1.4 metres wider than the approval at Camphor Cliffs. The applicants have provided details of the management controls that are in place to ensure that there are no conflict with visitors using the promenade. The rules expressly require beach hut owners to keep the promenade clear. The design of the beach huts is simple, with a pitched roof design. The height and width of the beach huts reflect that of the existing huts. As demonstrated in the accompanying plans, which form part of the application, the proposal will retain the rhythm and spacing of the existing huts and will not detract from the established coastal appearance or the character of the conservation area. On behalf of the applicants, we request that members of the committee support the officer recommendation and approve the application, attributing limited weight, if any, to the comments from the highway officer. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We also have Ward Councillor with us today. Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. And thank you very much for allowing me to appear remotely instead of driving from Christchurch to Poole today.
Not a problem, Councillor.
I've clearly, prior to making my objection, I would say that I'm very surprised to hear Mr. Moyer dismissing the highway officer's objections so casually, because if we can't depend on our officers, as he probably would remember, who can we depend on? And I would certainly say that the promenade is used for cycling, whatever we may think. The path above the beach, which is also obviously used for cycling and walking, is extremely unstable. There are roots everywhere, and there is no barrier between the path and going down the cliff. So that would be extremely difficult for cyclists and walkers to use. So there is no doubt that these huts in the retrospective application have been made much bigger, and they do encroach on the promenade. I hear also what the leaseholder says, and I think that's a very worthy aspiration, that that there are patrols going up and down and preventing encroachment. And I'm sure that he says this with the greatest wish that it was happening. But I can tell him from being a resident there and from what residents tell me that it is not happening. And the huts do encroach far more than one table and chair. Because the huts are bigger, it attracts parties. And the parties, in fact, do have parties. There are parties on the beach which go on from early morning till late at night. Now, I cannot see at any point where these parties are not encroaching not only on the promenade but on the quiet use of the beach by families with young children. So the very fact that the beach huts are bigger encourages far more use of the promenade. And these objections, of course, I would remind the committee, they're not the application is retrospective. So thus, these objections are not, oh, well, this might happen. These objections, in my particular case as well, are empirical. We know they do happen. However much the applicant might feel that he is policing it, I can assure him that when we walk up and down, as we always do, all the residents use it and visitors as well. It is not easy to get along the promenade when you have a large party using those huts. I'm also very surprised to hear from our former Christchurch officer, Mr. Moir, that it is not part of the local walking and cycling network, because there has been some dispute over this, but the cycles do use that promenade. It's not a question of whether they should, but whether they do. And even if the promenade was of the normal width, where it is where the huts have not been enlarged, it is quite tight. And it's not only cyclists. If Mr. Moir is saying that, or indeed the applicant is saying that it is not part of the local walking and cycling network, there are also people with pushchairs. There are people who are either disabled or elderly who use buggies. And again, the promenade is blocked. And that leads me on also, you say in the papers there's a small decked area in front of the huts. Well, yes, there is. And as the applicant says, and for a table and chair. Yes, but if you spread out table and chairs for the 10 or 11 people that can use the big huts, you know, I'm sure you can see my point. I won't label it anymore, but we have witnessed this usage, and whatever the applicant is saying, it is not policed as it should be. And also, I would also bring forward the Crime and Disorder Act of 1988, so named, but it isn't crime and disorder, but it's antisocial behaviour. People bring parties down because the huts are the size for a party. That goes on from early morning till late at night. In fact, I've heard it from where I live at 2 o'clock at night. And again, this is antisocial behaviour encouraged by the size of the huts. If you had a tiny beach hut, it would just be you, your granny and your children. This is not for that, and I'm sure that these huts have been enlarged in order to enable larger parties to go. We witness it all the time, and I do appreciate very much that the applicant does wish to police it, but I would say that at the moment it is not policed, and even if this was part of a permission given, I would be very wary, because I don't think you can police at 2 o'clock at night whatever staff you have there. So on the retrospective application, with all that I've put before you, i.e. the promenade is much smaller and there is a lot of antisocial behaviour encouraged by the larger hut and the bigger use of it, I would ask you to reject the retrospective application. Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to speak so long.
Thank you, Councillor Dedman. I don't think I would have stood a chance if I tried to shut you up beforehand. Mr. Hodges, could you do a bit of clarification for me, please?
Of course.
We've heard from Councillor Dedman and we've heard from the people in objection about these larger huts. Now, I've seen them. I went last night, and from what the people objecting are saying, you would think they were large discotheque-sized warehouses. Could you please tell us exactly what the difference is in sizes between the originals and the ones that are there now, please?
Yes, Chairman, hopefully you're seeing the slide of the huts as extended. So the dotted line was the original depth of the huts. And as I say, from my notes, this distance from here to here is approximately 1.8 metres. So we've gone from, let me just get back my notes, 3 points, hang on, apologies, Chairman. We've gone, what was 4.2, take away 1.8, is 2.6 to 4.2. Apologies for that. I couldn't see my notes on the screen. So as you can see, it's still a fairly typical beach hut size. I would not regard that as exceptionally large and against comparable beach huts seen across the BCP seafront, Chairman.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Hodges. I'm going to go over to members now. Who would like to kick this off? Councillor Johnson, followed by Councillor Simon McCormack, followed by Councillor Hall, please.
Thank you, Chair. Honestly, and quite frankly, I cannot see the big deal about this. I really can't. The promenade is so much narrower in so many places along the beach. And these, I heard comments in the statements about how this will ruin the visual amenity of the beach. They look like beach huts. They don't look like castles being built beach huts. Unless you are standing absolutely in line with the ones that we'll come to later, you cannot see that they are bigger. They are the same size as the ones that are further down and already in place. The promenade there is more than wide enough, unless somebody does take the mickey and plant something large right out across in front of them. It does not impinge on the ability of people to walk down that section of the promenade. It's still nearly 5 metres wide, which is much wider, as we've heard, than a lot of sections down that promenade. And if somebody does come down there and decide to park their car in front of the beach huts, that car will be summarily trashed by any, they will not take to it kindly. You can't just sit there in the middle of the promenade. The people walking past will take issue and will get you out of the way. I really can't understand the furor that this has created. And in regards to the antisocial behaviour, it's really not a planning matter. I mean, this is a public beach. Anyone who wants to go down there and have a party simply walks 5 metres out onto the beach and, they have a party. 1 extra metre, 1.5 metres of my beach hut does not suddenly change my attitude to parties from, oh, I can have 5 people, to, oh, I can have 35 people. So I really can't see anything wrong with this, Chair. I won't make a move because I'm the first speaker, obviously, but I would I'll listen to what other people have to say. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Apologies from myself, members. I meant to bring in Mr. Edwards from Highways before we went to the debate. It was my fault. I forgot all about it. Mr. Edwards, if you could clarify the points regarding Highways, please.
Sure. The promenade is, as Mr. Hodges has said, not a part of the highway, although any reasonable person would consider it to be so by the fact of what it looks like, that you could walk or cycle down there. I know there is a advisory sign in close proximity to the Noisy Lobster. It's that blue bordered sign, which you can only see if you are approaching the beach huts from Muddyford Quay, which advises people to dismount. Obviously, being an advisory sign, people can ignore that, and anyone using a cycle as a mobility aid could not dismount because then they would not be able to continue moving. If you are coming from the other direction, there is no sign telling you to get off your bike. Now, we have encouraged people to cycle along the promenade by installing cycle parking near the Noisy Lobster and at the beach huts at the other end of Avon Run Road near to Soft Cliff Road. So clearly people are cycling down here. Obviously, this time of year, there are fewer people doing so, but that doesn't prevent people doing it at other points in the year. Do you want me to continue on this, or did you have a particular question now around?
I do have a particular question, Mr. Edwards, and as much as I like to disagree with planning officers, etc., I would like to ask why you have objected to this and you have made no comments on the previous applications.
It has been a change in officer looking at this site, and as part of a wider reassessment of how we are treating applications for beach huts and similar uses along the promenade, the entire Transport Development Management team have tried to take a uniform approach to this. We've had a number of applications come in where people are seeking to essentially encroach on the promenade, and we are trying now to ensure a consistent width is maintained so that we don't end up with particular pinch points like there is at the Noisy Lobster. Now, I know there was reference to another application over at Canford Cliffs area where there is a short pinch point of just around 4 meters. However, that's for only 2 or 3 meters in length. It's unlike here where you have a much longer pinch.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. So back to members. Councillor Bartlett, please.
Thank you, Chair. Right.
Sorry, Chair, I thought I was next to you.
Sorry, you were.
Thank you, Chair. For my point, I've got two parts of it. But the first part is establishment of character, and the second point is how you could go against an establishment of character. So before this application, if I was to ask anybody in this room to draw a beach hut, they would be drawing a much shorter beach hut than what we've seen here. Nobody in this room would be drawing a long, elongated beach hut. They would be drawing a shorter beach hut. And I think that in itself establishes a character of what a beach hut actually is. It's a shorter hut, not a longer hut, what we've seen in this application. And to reinforce that point, if you were to go into any seaside town in the UK, into a gift shop or a tourist information, and to buy a postcard with a beach hut on the front, again, it would be the same shorter beach hut that we've seen originally before this application was, and these longer beach huts were built. And so that, in my mind, establishes what a beach hut actually is, and the shape of a beach hut and the look of a beach hut. And so that's the establishment of a character. The second part of my point is to talk about how we've broken that character of what a beach hut actually is. And you're going to have to indulge me slightly here, Mr. Chairman, because I've got a bit of a story about how I came to the conclusion of why this goes against the character of a beach hut. And a few weeks ago, I was at a child's birthday party, and there was this clown, and this clown had, as you can imagine, a white face, big hair, and everything. And he had these really long shoes. And I thought to myself, what makes these shoes funny? And what makes these shoes funny? Because they're just a pair of shoes, but they're really long, and that makes them funny. And they're funny because they're out of character. And these beach huts are the same principle. They're out of character, which makes them look funny. And so that's my second point of why I think we should refuse this application today. These beach huts are out of character of one, of this area, but two, of what a beach hut actually is. So today I will not be supporting this application based on that point, out of character.
Thank you, Councillor McCormick. Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Again, I've listened to the ward councillors and I've had a lot of correspondence. And again, I can't support this application. And also, I have seen cyclists use that on a regular basis. So although it's not a highway, it is used by cyclists. I do think it's out of character. I think it will be detrimental, and it's also a loss of public open space. Christchurch Council did support the promenade with a massive amount of money to have it built, although the had other contributions, but we did pay a lot of money for this, and the public expect to have a certain amount of right of way, and they lose that, so they lose public open space, which I cannot support. It is an encroachment. Both ward councils are against it, and I'd like to support them. I can't support this in any way at all. I think we're losing a lot of public open space, and we even lose more down here. It's also completely out of character. And when you get larger beach huts, we have a sand spit which have sleeping accommodation. At what time, what size will that stop? Did you want people really have beach huts that you can sleep in? They don't have them in Boscombe, but they do on the sand spit. So I can't support this, and I think it should be refused. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Bull, did you indicate? No. That's why I've gone wrong. Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so I think the planning officer is basically saying that there are no material grounds on which to refuse this application. I actually don't agree with that, I'm afraid, because I have looked at the policy HE1 sorry, I beg your pardon, HE2 in particular. And I know that the town council had also opposed this particular application, which is, I think, is a valid issue, because the town council obviously understand the issues at the beach, and of course there's been a huge number of representations against the development also, which I think we do have to remember. Notwithstanding that, the key to it is, of course, the policy, whether there are material reasons why it should not be approved. Now, when I visited the site, without really thinking about the policies too much, I just looked at it and thought, well, actually, is it wide enough? You know, these beach huts in themselves, okay, it might be nice to have a large beach hut, but can the promenade actually accommodate them at that size? My view was that no, it cannot. And it's easy to see when a number of people are using the beach huts that they would very easily encroach into the promenade area and would narrow it to a point that it could, at busy times in particular, make it a pinch point on the promenade. I've absolutely no doubt about that. Now, it has been referenced other developments where pinch points on the promenade occur, and not just at this site, and other sites along the promenade. But of course, each application you have to consider on its own merits or otherwise. And in this case, you know, without looking at all the reasons why those other applications have been granted, you can't really take those into consideration. This has got to be assessed under its own right. I actually believe that, you know, these large beach huts are to create insufficient space on the promenade. I would take exception to Councillor Toby Johnson's comment here that, well, if there's a problem, then the public have come along and sort it out, won't they? Well, actually, you know, let's have a punch-up over it, shall we? You know, the idea of planning is to prevent issues in the public, not, you know, expect the public to deal with them if you come across a problem. So I really think that's a very poor argument. I'm sorry, Toby. Yeah, just going then to why I couldn't support it, and I'm going to tell you exactly what it is. If you look at policy HE2, design of new development, in particular, the relationship to nearby properties, including minimised general disturbance to amenity. I think that there is a disturbance to the general amenity on the promenade because of the size of these beach huts. I also believe the layout and site coverage are implications in that. It is covering too much effectively at the site. I don't particularly have a problem with the architectural style. I think that's acceptable. I think the scale of the development, again, is too large and for this particular application. And I think of HE2, those are the material reasons why the application should not be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Councillor Trent, please.
Thank you, Chair. I scanned through all the objections, and I thought, well, there seems to be a lot of objections to this. And when I visited it on Monday, I looked at it and thought I'd turned up in the wrong place, because quite frankly, I just could not see what the complaints were about. And to make it even more confusing, there was a comment, a favourable comment about the next lot of beach huts along on Friars Cliff, and that seemed a lot more narrow and congested than I saw at this site. And you know, the main seafront I'm familiar with is basically a walk from Bournemouth Pier to Branksome Chine and thereabouts. And considering that has things like land trains going down it, I didn't get the impression on this particular bit of seafront that it was actually any narrower. There were a lot of people using it. The car park was almost full, despite the fact the weather was awful. But I was really struggling to see what the objections were. So I would have to go along and support the recommendation to grant, because I really am struggling to see what the problems are, despite the sheer number. And, you know, we have to acknowledge that a lot of people have objected, but it just doesn't seem to add up with a site visit. And, you know, I don't know that particular stretch of coast. It's not, you know, it's kind of out of my zone, but, you know, it seemed to be, apart from the cramped bit by the Noisy Lobster, it seemed to be quite a generous promenade. So, but as I say, I would have to go along with supporting the application.
Right, Councillor Trent. Councillor Barron.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm sort of struggling with the allegations that a larger hut will sort of entice people to have acid house raves or whatever it's being accused of. I just don't accept that. You know, there's still not, you know, it's not a big sort of party room. It just, I struggle to accept that. Regarding the cycling, are there actually any bylaws along there to stop cyclists cycling along there? This is just advisory. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I was not on the committee at the meeting when this was discussed before, so I'm coming at this new, completely new, and it's not a part of the area that I know at all well. I was there on Tuesday for a site visit, but basically that was really about the first time. And like Councillor Trent, I found it difficult to see, frankly, what the fuss was about. It was raining, there were very few people around, the cafe was heaving, but on the actual promenade there was hardly anyone. And for one thing, I found it very difficult to actually see where the promenade started and finished, because there was so much sand over the promenade. So that's a little message to the beachfront team, please do something about it, but that's not relevant to this really. And I mean, we had a talk about if you were drawing a beach hut. Well, if I was drawing a beach hut, it would be, you know, front on, because I'm not a good artist. And these are beach huts, no doubt about it. If you go along down towards Poole, there are a variety of designs of beach hut and sizes. These are standardised, absolutely uniform, only 3 different colours. They're absolutely standardised. Yes, some stick out slightly more than others, but apart from that, they are identical to my mind. I must admit I've never found the attractions of having a garden shed on the beachfront have always passed me by. So I'm probably biased against and biased for, but I really cannot see the problem. It seems to me we've heard from the management that they have a rule that people shouldn't encroach more than I think a metre in front. It seems to me that one way of making it clear what is expected, it would be for the BCP to actually draw a white line at approximately a metre in front of the huts, so that it's clear that that is the limit of where you can get to. And I think it must be BCP, not the management, because that's promenade. So I assume I mean, my first reaction was, could we make a condition? But I don't think we can, because I think it's BCP. But if we could, I would like that. Yeah. But as I say, I really can't see that there's a problem. The promenade is wide. We've got far narrower down our end, in the pool end, the sandbanks end. And as Councillor Trent said, with land trains and things, so I really can't see what the fuss is about. But of course, I haven't seen it in the height of summer.
Thank you, Councillor Pedham. Councillor Dion, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for the officer. So I'm just trying to understand why it's retrospective permission. Basically, what triggered? How did we get it here to the committee as retrospective? If I had a beach hut, I wouldn't just automatically have assumed I'm going to enlarge it onto public property without some sort of permission. So I'm still baffled how it got here. Thank you.
Mr. Hodges.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, the facts of the case are that the beach huts were extended. You've heard from the leasee of the site that the huts were extended by them. Ours is not to stand in judgment on why they did it. It's just to deal with the application on its merits as it stands now, Chairman. So the planning system exists for us to be able to consider a retrospective application, and in this instance we can see the works as complete and take a very clear view on the impacts of that as a result. Hope that helps.
Just while we have you on here, Mr. Hodges, could you comment on Councillor Pederin's point about having a line down there, just to say, would that be down to the managing agents or would that be a BCP thing?
I think it's outside the scope of the planning application.
Yeah, I do too. But whilst we have people in the room, it'd be a good idea for them to hear.
I fully accept it's not part of the planning, but it seems to me that would be one measure if it was acted on.
Well, we do have the applicant in the room with us, Councillor Pedderman, and he could hear that possibly if this were to go forward, and may well to want to do something about that, because it would at the end of the day help himself if there is a line there, a demarcation line if you like, but that will be between him and BCP Council to come to an agreement on at some stage if this application were to be granted. Councillor O'Neill, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting application for all sorts of reasons, but I must be honest, I note the pinch point, the most significant pinch point is at the end of the car park and in front of the catering facilities, the shop and the takeaway. But once one gets beyond that, the promenade does open up quite significantly. In terms of the hut design, I actually do think they add to the character and the offering of that seafront. And to their credit, they are well maintained. I wish that other areas of BCP had similarly maintained huts. I do believe the space is sufficient in front of the huts. Excepting for 3 or 4 months of the year, all promenades are busy. Whichever way you cut it, they are busy. And I don't think that this addition actually changes or damages how the beachfronts are used. To the east of these huts, there is, towards Highcliffe Woods, there is further huts. And the space there is between 7 and 9 feet. Now that is cramped all year. And I often walk along this area. I actually think this proposal is reasonable. I think it's acceptable. I don't think it does any damage, and I do believe it offers great facility for both the users and the public. And I think the developments that have taken place in this area meet the needs of holidaymakers and the residents, many of which walk and use this area. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Simon Bull, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Lepidovin put it on said the fact, you know, it's BCP, it's promenade, and I think these beach huts do encroach upon the promenade and upon the amenity value of the area. We've heard that cycles are permitted along there. They are advised to dismount, but many of them won't. We also have scooters. We have groups of people wandering there. I think it encroaches too far across the promenade, which was extended using public money, as we've heard. I really don't think we should be considering granting this application. We've heard from the ward councillor Leslie Dedman that it's already creating problems for locals, the use of the beach into the night, supported by the extended beach huts. So obviously we're not having a rave inside the beach huts. That would be ridiculous. But it does encourage people to bring more stuff, more equipment down, spend longer time on the beach, disturbing residents and neighbours, and I'm not minded to support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Bull. Councillor Bartlett, you wanted to come back?
Thank you. Yes, I did. Could you put the photographs back up, please?
Which ones?
The ones which show the. That's it. That's the ones. That's great. And the bottom line to this is a promenade big enough to accommodate the size of beach hut, and will it affect other users of the promenade? Now, interestingly, there's been all these objections. There's been lots of words about this, but there's not been a lot of evidence, has there? That's the problem. What is the evidence? These photographs are taken. I don't know what time of year these were taken, but there's hardly anybody there. But in the course of a summer, you get a completely different picture. Now, but having said that, just look at this picture. You can see on the right-hand picture there are 3 individuals in near view, and the distance between the one in the centre of the promenade and the beach hut. And look at that distance. Now, if you were then to superimpose a table and chairs in that space, and then put maybe a couple of cyclists going along the prom at the same time, you can see very, very quickly that actually there isn't enough room. And what we're talking about, of course, in the summer, is having that whole promenade actually heaving with people. That's the issue. But unfortunately, we can't see evidence to support what I've just said, other than what we've got. But I would suggest to you that even with that photograph, it provides evidence to support the contention that the promenade cannot accommodate that size feature. And for that reason, and that's the only reason, I do like the design, I do believe it contravenes policy HE2 of the Christchurch core strategy, and I've moved to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to come back in. Firstly, apologies if I did phrase that badly earlier on. Certainly, I'm not advocating for punch-ups between people on the beachfront. As boring as I'm sure that must be for everyone. But no, my point is that if you take the mickey in front of the beach huts, you're going to get people shouting at you the whole time, and it will spoil your own enjoyment of it. And so I'm not sure that one is too much of an argument either way. In terms of the problems that are already causing, the only problem that I've heard that it's already causing, given the fact that they've been there in this size for now, I think it's 2 to 3 years, the only problem we've heard is the possible antisocial behaviour, and that's not a planning matter, because it's a public beach. They can use that for parties and whatever they want at any time of year for anything. It's got nothing to do with the beach huts, in my opinion. Yes, a slightly larger one might encourage you to put in something more to accommodate it, but the point is, if you use the beach, you can use the beach, and I really don't think that is a reason to refuse this. And I certainly can't support the move that's on the table, but I did just want to come in and clarify those things. if we had overcrowding problem, we'd have heard about it in the last however long they've been there. But we haven't. We haven't heard issues. There haven't been reports of massive overcrowding, people being knocked off their bikes, people being hit by cyclists in this area. And so, in my mind, that in and of itself shows that there's not enough evidence for us to say that it's a massive pinch point in this issue. We can't talk about it as if they will suddenly start causing problems the minute they get planning permission. It would have already caused problems over the past 3-4 years. So I certainly can't support the move that's on the table. Thank you, Chairman.
Chair, could I just clarify?
Can I? Yeah, because I want to ask you a question.
Thank you, because I am not moving on the basis of antisocial behaviour or behaviour of people on the promenade. I am moving purely against policy HE2 and the specific points that I raised earlier on. Okay, so it's nothing to do with behaviour. I want to make that absolutely clear. It's about it's about contrary to site coverage. It's contrary to the relationships of nearby properties, including minimise general disturbance to amenity. Okay, and it's also layout of the development. And those are the specific items of H2 that I'm moving.
Could I just ask you to clarify something else that you said just now, going back to the photograph? Could you just repeat what you were saying about the 3 people that you saw on there?
Yeah, the argument is that when people are using these beach huts, they will be using the areas in front of the beach huts, and that will be inevitably a table and chairs. What I'm saying is that the person can see more or less in the middle of the photograph. If you can sort of approximate the width of 3 people walking side by side there, you can see there's, if you were to put a table and chairs in front of the beach hut at the same point, there would be very little room left for anybody else other than 3 people walking abreast. And if there were a lot of people walking down there, any table or chair in front of the beach hut would actually be causing an obstruction. And when I say if you couple that with lots of people using the promenade in the height of summer, it will be a problem. And that's why I don't think the promenade is large enough to accommodate it without causing some difficulty. That's as simple as that.
I was just looking at the photographs and I'd blown it up quite big to have a better look at what you were saying. So thank you for that, Councillor Bartlett. So do we have a seconder for Councillor Bartlett's move? Yeah. Councillor Hall. Okay, members, are there any further things that people would like to say before I say a few words? No? Good. I went down last night and I looked at this again, having already seen it once before. A beach hut is a beach hut. Everyone says about the size of them. Well, I'm afraid I don't agree with it. Beach hut sizes have changed over the years. When I was a little boy all those years ago, back in the 60s, growing up, yeah, beach huts were the same size. Now they're all bigger. Everywhere you go, you see bigger beach huts. It's a bit like people's houses, isn't it? You build a 3-bedroom house the same size as all a terrace, and everyone adds on an extension to it, so it's no longer the same as it was before. I don't think we can stand in the way of progress. I understand people's attitudes and their reasonings, and particularly Councillor Bartlett's reasonings for HE2, but in my opinion, there is enough room there. I think the majority of people are sensible enough to not block it. I've never heard of any complaints coming into either us as an authority when we've been BCP with regards to incidents of people being run over by mobility scooters or cyclists or parents in pushchairs being pushed into the promenade on the sand, because you can't. Basically, the sand and the promenade are at the same level last night. I only commented to the Vice Chairman last night, I wouldn't want to ride my cycle along here because there's so much bloody sand on this prom. It would be almost impossible to ride it along there. There is a pinch point outside the Noisy Lobster where you have the little dog leg coming past it. That's already there. It's been there for many, many, many a year. And again, we've never heard any complaints about that. With regards to local residents, you actually have to go up the hill and the houses are on the opposite side of the road. So there is quite a distance between those residents and the seafront. I know noise carries. My ward is the East Cliff. So I have endless amount of complaints about noise carrying from people activities down on the seafront up onto the flats at the top. We're a seaside area here to enjoy themselves, to have fun, as do local residents. and they all have the right to do so in a peaceful and enjoyable manner. And I, for one, will not support this move to refuse, as I do not think that there is a reason to do so, in my opinion. Okay, so I will not be supporting the move, and I understand the reasons why the mover has made them, and I understand his reasons for putting that move forward, but I do not agree with him on this occasion. So that said, we do have a move to refuse this application. I will just confirm with the mover that he has reasons for that so that the planning officers can understand them. I believe your move is solely on HE2, Councillor Bartlett.
Yeah, I will read them for the third time.
Please do, just for clarification.
Contrary to policy HE2, in terms of the development layout. Come back on that.
Yeah, please.
No, I'm not talking about the character. Policy H2 is about the design of new development. Okay. Within Christchurch and East Dorset, the design of development must be of high quality. So we're talking about quality of design, reflecting enhancing areas and recognise local distinctiveness. To achieve this, the development will be permitted if it is compatible with or improves its surroundings in. Well, I'm saying it's contrary to those issues regarding the layout, the scale, and the relationship to nearby properties.
Councillor Hodges? Sorry, don't become a councillor.
Thank you, Chairman.
You're better off where you are.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. No, apologies if myself and Councillor Bartlett are talking at slightly cross purposes. The reason for refusal is not referring to some form of highway safety or pedestrian movement form of issue, which was part of the previous reason for refusal, because as for the reasons set out in the report, we have significant concerns about our ability to defend such a reason, but we are talking about layout, appearance, design, which are HE2 character and appearance issues. So it was that point I was trying to get to the bottom of, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have the move to refuse this, and I will do the roll call. If you are in support of the move to refuse, please say for. If you are against, please say against. I personally am against. Councillor Johnson?
Against.
Councillor Barron?
Against.
Councillor Bartlett?
For.
Councillor Bull?
For.
Councillor Dion?
Against.
Councillor Davies?
Against.
Councillor Hall?
For.
Councillor Hilliard? Sorry, Councillor Pedivin?
Against.
Councillor McCormick?
For.
Councillor O'Neill?
Against.
And Councillor Trent?
Against.
And finally, Councillor Lawton, please.
Against.
Thank you. Joe, do you have the numbers? I couldn't keep up on that.
That's fine. Thank you, Chairman. So the total number of votes for is 4. The total number of votes against is 9, and there were no abstentions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So that move to refuse has been lost. We will now go back for a further move, of which I'm happy to make a move to grant this application. And Councillor Johnson is happy to second that, and that would be to grant as per the officer's recommendations. Again, I will call out a roll calling in order, and if members could please answer in turn. Councillor Kelsey, I am for. Councillor Johnson?
For.
Councillor Barron?
For.
Councillor Bartlett?
Against.
Councillor Bull?
Against.
Councillor Dion?
For.
Councillor Davies?
For.
Councillor Hall?
Against.
Councillor Lepedevin?
For.
Councillor McCormick?
Against.
Councillor O'Neill?
For.
Councillor Trent?
For.
And Councillor Lawton?
For.
Thank you very much. Joe, the numbers, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So the total number of votes for is 9. The total number of votes against is 4, and there were no abstentions.
Thank you very much. Therefore, that application of retrospective planning permission for the beach huts is granted. And at that, we will now move on to the second application. And again, I will ask Mr. Hodges to present his case, please. Mr. Hodges.
Thank you, Chairman. This will be brief. The site is adjoining the site of the previous item, but running to the west. This stretch of beach huts here. The key aspect just to get over is that the forward extension of these huts is less than the previous items. So these huts are coming forward 1.2 metres. And the purpose for that is, as shown on this plan, is to in effect retain a promenade width equivalent to that seen in front of the huts to the east. Chairman, these are the huts which will be extended under the application, as you see, and running up towards the noisy lobster and the kiosk and the public toilets there. As set out in the report, Chairman, we consider the application to be acceptable and recommend it for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Hodges. Just for transparency, Councillor Barron has to leave the meeting at this point due to family circumstances. So thank you very much for your attendance, Councillor Barron. Joe, do we have deputations on this one, please?
Thank you, Mr. I've received statements both in support and objection to this item, as well as the ward councillor, who I understand is still on the call. Firstly, the first statement in objection has been received from a Mr. Steve Alves of the Friars Cliff Residents Association, and the written statement is as follows. The previous widening of the promenade was to be for flood defence, protecting coastal erosion and for the benefit of all beach users. These planned extended huts will reach further across the promenade. The benefit of this amenity space will no longer be available for the general public, and the effective width of the promenade reduced to less than that in 2014, as confirmed by BCP Highways Department, recommending refusal, stating the proposed development, by reason of its extended size and further intrusion onto the promenade, is considered to give rise to conditions prejudicial to local amenity. The promenade would be reduced to a substandard width to facilitate convenient, simultaneous access for all, therefore failing to help achieve the Council's strategic objective of facilitating and increasing levels of walking and cycling and comprising the existing route network. The development is contrary to the aims of paragraphs 110 and 112 of the National Planning Policy Framework 2021, which seek new development to provide safe and suitable access for all, to give priority first to pedestrian and cycle movements. Local Plan Policy H12 and policies HE2 and LN1 of the core strategy require development to be appropriate in character, scale and design. The extended huts are double the size of existing huts and therefore do not comply regarding size and mass. The devised area is within the Mudderford Conservation Area. The extended huts are massively out of scope, size and mass from both existing Avon Beach Company huts and BCP traditional beach huts. The end of the promenade, with its bottleneck of takeaway, coffee shop, decking and event hut, is already congested, and further narrowing will lead to more congestion. The huts will be visually intrusive along this conservation area, and BCP have already refused a similar scheme under application 821-0346, quoting, "The beach huts, by reason of their extended size and further intrusion onto the promenade, are considered to result in overdevelopment that would harm the visual amenities of this seafront locality. The width of the promenade would be reduced, preventing access for all users of this space, and seating paraphernalia placed beyond the beach huts would create obstructions for walking, cycling, pushchairs, wheelchairs and scooters. As such, the proposal is considered to be contrary to policies KS11 and HE2 of the Christchurch and East Dorset Local Plan, Core Strategy 2014. I would therefore request that this planning application is refused, as there have been no changes to address the above reason for refusal." End of statement 1. The second statement in objection has been received from a Ms. Valerie Hobden, and it is as follows. "Even when the existing beach huts are not in use, say on a winter weekend, the promenade is already overly congested on the section with shorter beach huts. People are milling around here going to visit the Avon Beach shop, queuing for ice cream from the shop, queuing for the coffee shop cabin and queuing at the lobster hatch for fish and chips. The ensuing traffic jam is unpleasant. Frequently you must thread your way through to be able to walk along this section of promenade. In the summer, crowds are worse, of course. Also, to use the beach huts, the occupants lower their step onto the promenade, taking up a further 3 foot of width, and then usually sit in front of or around their step, encroaching another 6 foot onto the public walkway of the promenade. This means a loss of around 9 foot of promenade for each occupied beach hut. In conclusion, please refuse the application to extend the depth of the beach huts." That's the end of the second statement in objection. we do still have with us the applicant and agent. So, Mr. Peter Hayward, if you'd like to go first, thank you.
Hello again. I'd just like to clarify a couple of points raised in the debate and also about this particular application. The beach huts aren't possible to be used outside daylight hours. Any noise from the beach would not be caused from our huts, but instead general public using the beach. Excuse me. The first extended hut on this current application is some 40 metres away from the at times congested area at the ice cream parlour. We've decided not to extend hut, or not to propose to extend huts numbers 1 to 20 as we've taken this into consideration. As an active, hugely engaged tenant on this site, no one is more invested into making sure that it's an attractive place for the public to visit than ourselves. If Naven Beach Promenade was overcrowded, wasn't a desirable place for people to walk and visit, we would be the most affected in our business, in our restaurants, in our takeaways, and general visitors to Avon Beach. Every application that we have submitted over our 10 years, which has been dealt with huge opposition throughout, and there's been a real stress and strain on me and my family. We've done it for the greater good of the area, and it is a much more desirable place to visit, and we are very proud of what we have done, and we hope to continue to do so. I take on board the comments regards the pinch points in the coffee area and the takeaway facilities, and we hope to bring to you a proposal in September with regards to that area that will improve it greatly. I also take on board the Sandy Promenade. It was a day after a big storm, and there's another one forecasted tomorrow, so we kind of thought best wait until that one passes. But I do hope that you follow your officer's recommendation and also grant this for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, just a few points to pick up on in terms of the deputation for this application, rather than reiterating our previous submission. During the debate, I think reference was made to beach huts to the east of the applications you've considered. As you've discussed, they are already larger than those as part of the retrospective application and the application before you, so there is already a character in terms of larger beach huts. And with regards to the width of the promenade, again, it'll be maintained at a width of a minimum of 5 metres. We've given examples throughout BCP where the promenade is already narrower than 5 metres. So to reiterate the applicant's comments, we hope you can support the officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Members. Oh, sorry, Councillor Deadman. Apologies.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, still here, still listening. Yes, I'm a bit confused because when I was chairing the Borough Planning Committee, I was very much told that we consider each application on its own merits, so we shouldn't be surely discussing the previous application, which was the retrospective one. I'd also used the same arguments for that one, if we are considering that debate, which apparently we are, that the huts suggested in this application to be made much bigger will encroach upon the promenade. I'm going to repeat that. They will encroach upon the promenade because they will have all of the hut users' items in front of them. I haven't seen the pictures that we had for the previous application. Are there any more pictures, or is this just it, existing and proposed promenade width? Yes, that picture, whilst being very lovely, is not at all representative of what residents are talking about with the huts. I don't know what time of year that was taken, or what time in the morning or the night. I'm very aware that the applicant says the huts are to be used in daylight hours. Well, I'm just absolutely amazed. I mean, if Mr. Hayward is trying to do that, then he's totally unsuccessful. And I do think it's a very good idea. Well done, Mr. Hayward, but it isn't working, is it? So on that consideration that it does narrow the promenade and it causes a lot of obstruction, and on page 119 of this present application paper, I think it's under item 14, it does state a piece about antisocial behaviour, which I believe the Vice Chairman thinks is not relevant to any application. Well, if it's not relevant, then why on earth have we got it there? Why has somebody bothered to type it out? It is relevant, antisocial behaviour, whether or not the applicant thinks that this is because the huts are bigger. Empirically, the huts are bigger, more people come down, and there are more noises. I note that the chairman, I believe, has very kindly visited and says that the houses are way back. My house is even further back, and yes, I do hear the noise from the beach. Admittedly, I also hear the noise from the car park, and that is another indication of how much this beach is now in use. So that is my objection to the enlargement in terms of impinging on the area of walking, sitting and cycling. There was consultation with the residents, and I believe that there was a mention that nobody talked about enlarging the promenade. It was discussed in the consultation. I was the county councillor at that point, and the residents held that the promenade needs to be wider. I'm quoting from my notes of that time, but the enhancements such as trees and lighting are firmly rejected in favour of the low-key, quiet, family-oriented promenade we are used to. So the width of the promenade was mentioned. And we're also told that there is nothing in the seafront strategy about this. Well, clearly we are going to be doing the seafront strategy, so that might change, mightn't it? But too late for this application. I don't think there's much more that I want to say, Chairman. So basically, the huts are bigger, they're encroaching on the promenade. I also feel, as one of the previous designers of the previous policies for Christchurch, it does not add to the character and appearance of the area. It is a conservation area. It's not really relevant to say, oh yes, but that bit isn't, because just up the road it is. And you can't suddenly say, oh well, yes, but we're not going to use that. So I really feel that HE2 is relevant to this. So I would hope that you would again refuse this application on those grounds, and certainly that that the application is visually intrusive and against KS11 as well. So I think I've managed to fling so much into that. I hope everybody understood what I meant. But and as I say, we're considering this application on the merits of this application with no recourse to the previous debate, as far as I understand it.
Thanks, Councillor Edmund. You're absolutely right, of course. This application is totally separate to the previous one. I think the reasons why the officers didn't go into so much detail is possibly because we have heard the arguments that were used for retrospective ones, and they would be very similar arguments. Members, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you're quite right. This is absolutely separate. However, we cannot get away from the fact that given that it's right next door to the previous application, the arguments will be obviously incredibly similar. And for this one, in my view, the beach huts are not coming as far forward as the other ones, purely because the applicants have clearly seen that they don't want to narrow the promenade to the point where it is unusable. It's getting no narrower than 5 metres, which is the minimum in the guidance, coming too far forward in my view. All of the other points regarding this one, I have said, yes, it was in the previous debate, but I don't want to bore members to death with the sound of my voice repeating the same things, because if they are the same arguments, and I can't see how we can refuse this one and maintain a level of consistency in our decision making with the previous debate that's gone forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Bartlett, please.
Thank you. Taking this on its merits as an individual application, it is different actually. One is that the promenade is actually narrower over a longer width, a length rather. It's almost consistent all the way along, whereas the other one was widening out as the further you went along it, it widened up. But it was only on the extreme sort of what side would it be, the western side, where it was actually narrowed down to around the 5 metre point, where this is sort of going to be 5 metres all the way, more or less along So it's almost parallel, if you see what I mean. So it is different. The dimensions are different. And hey ho, not surprisingly, the applicant has recognised this, and actually for that reason has reduced the depth that they want to extend the beach hut. So I think there's a recognition that there is a potential for encroachment on the promenade. And I go back to the point that I made, that if you put a table and chairs in front of those beach huts and there's a 5 metre bit, by the time you put a table and some chairs around there, you've knocked 2 metres off of it and you're left with 3 metres. Take a table like this, for example, you know, that I'm sat in front of, put a couple of chairs around it, you're easily into 2 metres before you know, and you know, the way these chairs things sprawl out all over the place in front of beach huts, we've all seen it. And so I think that, again, I apply the argument. In this case, you're actually looking at that potentially going all the way along the whole row of beach huts at 5 metres over a longer length. So I do think that there is still, you know, I think this issue actually is worse than the previous application. So again, I'm sorry, but I can't support it for the same reasons. In fact, even more so than the previous one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Councillor O'Neill. Sorry, Councillor Trent. Sorry. Too many Tonys in this room.
Yeah, a name that's almost extinct in, you know, younger generations. But
there's a reason for that.
Yeah, it was actually quite useful that these two applications were together, because visiting the site to look at the previous application also made it a lot easier to work out how this would look in practice. The only thing I would say, and I wonder if it could be added as an advisory, is that I think this run of extended huts would be enough. The first few huts from 1 to 22 or whatever shouldn't be altered at all, because, as has been said several times, that's where the pinch point is. The nearer you get to the Noisy Lobster, the more of a pinch point it is. And even if it were improved, I think, you know, having the ones that aren't in this application, the first few, you know, not would make the whole thing work better. So I support the application, but with the request that we seek some kind of added note or whatever is the most appropriate thing to do to dissuade any application for the first 22 huts.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. I think you would have heard the applicant clearly state earlier that he was not intending to do those ones. And I think he's heard your comments on that, so we'll take that on board as and when we go forward with this one. But thank you for your comments, Councillor Trent. Councillor Hall, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I still think it's losing too much of the promenade, mental, and really, again, highways were against it. I think it's very important that we do encourage cycling along there. It's a lovely cycle, and they were going originally to cycle from there up to Highcliffe. That was the plan, and I think cycling is important in that area, so I won't be supporting this application. If Councillor Bartlett did propose refusal, I second it. Thank you.
He hasn't. There's been no move to refuse at this moment in time. Councillor Bull.
Thank you, Chair. This is a different application, as Councillor Bartlett said, because of the continuous minimum depth proposed of 5 metres along the front there. And it's a front we're only going to have for, what, 30, 40 years going forward. So we want people to enjoy it as much as they can, and we need space for everyone. So we need space for the cyclists, space for disabled people, space for scooters, space for young children. It's the same, really. The minimum depth of 5 metres, as Councillor Bartlett pointed out, you put a table, you put chairs, you put a cyclist, kids running about. There isn't the space for it. So again, I won't be supporting this application.
Thank you, Councillor Bull. Any further comments, Councillor O'Neill?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, again, I find this one quite interesting, and I think to the applicant's credit, he has reduced the reduced the size of the extensions. It reduces the width of the promenade by about 1.2 to 1.3 metres, yet it leaves 5 to 5.4 metres retained. I actually think that this development will give a more balanced perspective to the whole length of the promenade, which I think is important, and that adds to the character, in my opinion. I think it's also admirable that the huts 1 to 23 are not being extended, which I think shows the consideration of the applicant. The only other thing I'd add to that, this is a holiday destination. It's a holiday destination that is becoming more popular. And there's nothing any of us can do about that. And I think one of the reasons it's becoming more popular is that it's more reflective of the older traditional seaside. It is not a commercialised entity. It has a catering facility, a takeaway and a shop. It doesn't have anything else. And that does appeal to a lot of young families. So I'm very supportive of this element of the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor O'Neill. Councillor McCormick.
Just wanted to repeat my comments from the last one.
Not your clown substance again, please.
I mean, yeah, clown shoe beach huts. It does seem to fit quite well. Yeah, I just wanted to repeat from last time. There's clearly an established look of a beach hut, character of a beach hut in the UK, and this is going against that character, and I don't think it's adding to this area at all. And you know, the issues with the promenade becoming narrower is a big problem. I've lived in Christchurch my whole life for 33 years, and I've used this beach every summer. It is much busier than what the photos show, especially in the height of summer. I've often sat on a boat just off, and you look at Bournemouth, and then you look at this beach, and they're very similar in how busy they are, like people per square metre and all that. And this is, in my view, is gross overdevelopment of this area. You wouldn't take a block of 1-bedroom flats next to a park and create 3-bedroom flats and expect the park not to be any more busier. This is exactly what's happening here. We're creating bigger beach huts, and that will create more people there. Like I say, it'll go from being just, as Councillor Dedman said, you know, mum, dad, 2 kids and granny, to large parties coming down. And if you've got that repeated over 20 or 30 beach huts, it's a lot of people and a lot of noise. And these comments about these beach huts only being used in daylight hours, you know, I've lived in it 33 years. They don't just get used in daylight hours. They never have been. They always get used late into the evening, always. I've been down there at 11 o'clock at night in the dark, and they're still being used. So, and for that reason, I won't be supporting this application.
Thank you, Councillor McCormick. Any further comments? Oh, sorry, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. The thing is that if you're looking at what you define as a beach hut, if you walk from Hengistbury Head down to Sandbanks, you'll see some beach huts like the ones we have here. Then you'll have some like you see to the west of Bournemouth Pier that are double-decked with balconies and a great big concrete blocks. So I don't think you can really say that there is a stereotypical beach hut anymore. Certainly not in our council. We have 5 or 6 completely different types of beach hut all the way along our seafront, and you know, so I really don't think that the clown shoes analogy does fit here. I can't see how we can say this is completely against what a beach hut is, because you just have to look at our own seafront to know that that's not the case. And with that in mind, and with the debate in mind, I will actually propose a move to grant as set out in the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Pellerin. Councillor McCoy.
I'm happy to clarify for Councillor Johnson. The size may differ, but the shape is the thing that's changing. So you could get a larger beach hut, but the shape of the beach hut would be the same. What I'm saying is the shape is changing, not the size is changing.
But if you walk down to Pool End, Councillor McCormack, you'll see that they're actually square, flat-roofed, look nothing like a traditional beach hut, as do the beach lodges. If you go along to the what's commonly known as the polo area on Sandbanks Beach, the beach huts, they're totally different. So your comments are totally false, I'm afraid.
Maybe those residents of Bull perhaps would like
have better taste.
Ones.
So moving on, I think one of the things we need to remember, of course, is with the increase of people coming down here and people bringing more and more equipment with them, you know, their buggies, especially families with children, under the smaller beach huts, they would have to stick them out on the concrete because there'd be nowhere to keep them. With the larger beach huts, it enables them to have more space inside. And I think we need to look at this from a family's and even from a disabilities point of view, that people with disabilities like to be inside the huts. Are we discounting those people, saying they can't come to the seaside? No, we're not. These beach huts being made larger will actually accommodate those people to a better standard, meaning the equalities in this area is better. And again, I see no reason to refuse this, so I will be supporting the move to grant this application. So members, we will go to the move on this one, to the vote. And I myself, Councillor Kelsey, I am for this application. Councillor Johnson, for. Councillor Barron, sorry, Councillor Barron has left the building. Councillor Bartlett?
I'm still here, against.
Councillor Bull?
Against.
Councillor Dion?
For.
Councillor Davies?
For.
Councillor Hall?
Against.
Councillor Lepedevin?
For.
Councillor McCormick?
Against.
Councillor O'Neill?
For.
Councillor Trent?
For.
And Councillor Lawton, please.
For.
Joe, could I have the numbers, please?
Certainly, thank you, Chairman. So the total number of votes for is 8 and the total number of votes against is 4. There were no abstentions, Chair.
Thank you very much. So that application is granted as per the officer's recommendation. I would just remind the room, he's heard lots of comments this morning about this, particularly about the enforcement of what goes on at the beach huts and how they're operated. And I would please ask him to be very mindful of what's been said and to take notice of what the local residents have indicated with regards to that. And I hope that he's able to run them successfully and keep everyone using the promenade, be they residents or beach hut owners, safe and welcome during the next summer period. Thank you. At that point, members, that is the end of this meeting for today. There is cake at the back if you want cake before you all rush off and have fish and chips. And we'll just have a quick 5-minute catch up with planning officers just to go forward for the next couple of meetings.